Okay, so I always like to start with a little diagram of what I'm going to be drawing. So I always like to start with just kind of half of a square vertical line horizontally over. We're going to do our high hip. We're also going to go across to the hip. We're also going to go across the waist. Hi, Felicity. So then we're also going to go across at the bust and the neck. At the bust, when we get to the outer horizontal point, we're also going to go up to the armpit point. So then we need all of our measurements, and we don't need a lot for this one. We need the bust, and we need everything divided by 4. So if you take your full circumference of the bust, the waist, the hip, and the high hip, you need to divide each of those by 4 because we're only going to do the pattern for a quarter of the body. It'll be the front and the back pattern, and we only do half because we'll cut on the fold. So these are all of our circumferences. So all of our horizontal lines, but now we need to do the vertical points. So go ahead and write out the measurement between your waist to your hip and your waist to your high hip. And then go ahead and do from the waist to the bust. From there, I did the bust to the neck and from the bust to the armpit. And when you do that armpit measurement, going a little lower is always better than going higher because otherwise it'll be hard to move your arm around. So once you have your measurements for all of those, we can go ahead and make our actual pattern. So again, I always just start by drawing a vertical line with a horizontal line. Make sure it is squared off, so you need this to be at a 90-degree angle. And I am sorry, my camera was a little too close, so you can't see that bottom line. I did a diagram with the hip and the high hip, but I didn't actually use the hip for my pattern because I wanted my shirt to end at my high hip. I didn't want it to go all the way down to my hip. Okay, so then once you have the hip drawn out, then go up to the high hip and draw across. And then from the bottom, go to the waist. So I have that waist to hip position that down on our little diagram we knew the measurements for. So from the bottom of the pattern, measure up to the waist and make a point there. And then from the waist, measure to the high hip as well and draw a little line there as well. So then we know that our high hip, 1/4 of it was 8.5, so I'm going to measure across 8.5. Waist, it was 6.6, so again, I'm going to draw a line over at 6.6 right at the waist. So now from the waist to the bust, take your measurement that you got there, so 6.5 for myself. And whatever your circumference divided by 4 was for the bust, go ahead and draw across there. Now from this point, for your neck measurement, you can go all the way up to your neck. I made mine a little bit shorter by about 3 inches because I didn't want it to be quite that high on me. And just draw a point there. It does not have to go the whole way across. We just need to know the height. And then from the bust line all the way at the edge, we need to know the vertical height from the bust to the armpit and just draw a mark there because that's where our armhole will need to be. So then take your French curve and just round off to all these points. And it doesn't have to be one smooth point all the way down. You can roll your French curve around a little bit, move things. If you don't have a French curve, I'll go ahead and put a link to the tools that I use in this tutorial. Yeah. Sorry, my daughter's getting snacks out. And then just make sure you round off all of those edges really well to connect from the bust to the waist to the high hip. And if you want your blouse to be much longer and go all the way down to your hip, you can do that as well. So now my French curve on the edge has a 1/2 inch mark. I just use that to add an extra 1/2 inch because I don't want the shirt to be skin tight. So then if you want, you can add your seam allowance in there as well and add another 1/2 inch. but I just do that when I cut out my pattern. At least for this one I did. So then go ahead and cut on that outer line. And the reason we don't need to do anything with the neck, we just need to cut up to it. We don't necessarily do this because the neck is going to drape down. And just cut out the whole pattern. Okay, and I am sorry, my video cut out for some reason. So you're going to choose how far down you want the draped neckline to go. I chose about an inch above my waist. And then just from the top corner on the straight edge where the neck is, cut a straight line down to that point. And then you can open it up to create that beautiful drape. The more you open it, the more dramatic of a drape you'll end up with. And then we just need to square off this top edge. So just fold that down across that top corner. Okay, so now we can actually cut everything out, and we're gonna go up above the top because we want to fold that top edge down. So make sure that straight edge of your pattern is next to the fold of the fabric, and you want to make sure that the horizontal lines of your pattern, so the circumferences, go with the stretch of the fabric, because you want your shirt to stretch horizontally, not vertically. So then I actually added in another 1/2 inch seam allowance while I cut this out, and I used my ruler to do that, just because again I didn't want this to be skin tight. And then cut a little notch where the top of that pattern is so that we know where to fold the top down. So I just used my ruler because it has a 1/2 inch edge on it to add another 1/2 inch to the pattern. And then just cut a nice straight line up from the edge. And that way you can fold it back, and we're folding it where we cut those notches on the edges, and then use the top part to cut the bottom folded edge to be the same. Now we're going to do the back of the shirt. So right above the bust, right between the bust and the armpit, go ahead and fold the pattern back and crease it nice so it stays folded. You can cut it off if you want. Just fold them if you want to keep the pattern for future use though. And then put it on the edge of your fabric. Again, make sure you're using the correct stretch direction on the fabric so that the shirt will stretch horizontally instead of vertically. And then I'm gonna stick a couple things on here to help keep it from moving anywhere. And I added 2 inches to the top of the back, and then I just evened out the bottom because mine was it wasn't very straight for some reason. Okay. And then again, I added a 1/2 inch on the back as well, but I also kept my pattern about a 1/2 inch from the edge of the fabric because I, again, did not want this shirt to be very tight. And then again, create a little notch at the top of the pattern so that we know where to fold it. Only do it on the outer edge of the fabric, don't do it on the folded part, otherwise you'll end up with a hole in the middle of your shirt and we don't want that. Okay, so now we're going to cut out the straps. So for this part, we want to make sure that horizontally the fabric does not stretch. So the length of the straps, we don't want them to stretch. And I cut mine to be, I cut out a 3-inch section, and I had folded my fabric a few times. I went as long as I could, the whole length of the fabric, to get these straps as long as possible, just in case. And then I cut that in half, so 1.5 inches on each strap. And really mine ended up being long enough that I just needed to use one, but I always like having backups just in case. So what you want to do is fold that in half and then take a really skinny piece of ribbon and sew it inside of it. So you don't want to sew on the ribbon, you want to keep the ribbon inside of the fold, but you want to sew over the top edge of the ribbon so that it is secured inside of it. And then you can just take the fabric and push it over the edge of the ribbon, and it will actually just fold over itself to turn the straps right side out. And if you have fabric that frays really easily, like mine does, you can even tell in the video how much the edges fray. I went over my edges 3 or 4 times when I sewed down the length of those to really make sure that these seams are not going to open. When you're pulling these over, make sure you just do them in like 2 or 3 inch sections while you're pulling so it doesn't get too bunched up or it will get stuck. And then once it's right side out, trim off the edge of the ribbon that you had sewed in and then cut it in half if yours is long enough. And then make sure you iron them really, really well so that they lay nice and flat and pretty. So now we're going to get out the back piece, and where that's folded down, where those notches were, just sew right down and then turn it right side out and iron it really well. And we're going to do the same thing with the front of the shirt. So fold it where those notches are, and then sew down the edges, turn it right side out, and iron it really well. And I did actually serge the edges of the fold so that they won't fray inside of my shirt. So now we'll put the right sides together of the front and back of the shirt, and starting at the bottom, line them up. And you can pin it down if you'd like, or just line it up really nicely and sew down the sides. So now we're going to attach the straps, and go ahead and iron this really well as you go. So with the shirt inside out, we're going to cut a little hole at each corner of the top of the front, and then go inside the fabric and stick the strap through that hole with about a 1/2 inch sticking out. And do it on the other side as well. So the strap is in between, the strap is on the right side of the fabric inside. So everything's turned inside out. The straps are touching the side of the front of the shirt. And that way, when you pull them back through, it'll turn the shirt right side out. We're going to do the same thing on the back. Turn the back inside out, cut 2 little holes for the straps, and tuck them through. And then just obviously make sure that you measure out how long the straps should be before you sew them on. So now that straps are attached, turn it right side out, make sure you iron everything really well, and all we have to do is hem the bottom. So I would recommend a rolled hem, either with your serger or with your sewing machine. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed watching. Please like and subscribe to see my next videos. Bye.